Hey everyone, and thanks for watching. My name is Chloe Knox, and I'm going to be discussing a recent event that occurred last week in West Palm Beach, Florida at Turning Point USA's Student Action Summit, in which I and about 3,000 other young conservatives attended to listen to a variety of conservative speakers, ranging from Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager, Dinesh D'Souza, Joe Walsh, and Tommy Lahren. Now, this discussion is going to be centering on that last speaker, but before I actually get into that, I'm going to briefly go over 3 reasons why I'm even making this blog to begin with. First of all, there's a lot of misinformation that's being circulated. Now, I don't like to use the term fake news because I personally think it's overused, but it's literal fake news in the sense that people were opposing me, and particularly in a Washington Examiner article, that I was a crybaby that just didn't get to answer her question. And that's just not at all true. I was actually the first to the mic to ask my question, as I will later explain. Secondly, I thought that this would die out by now, honestly. I did a couple interviews the night and the day after this occurred. However, I'm still receiving a lot of questions and inquiries about what exactly happened. Just recently, actually, my friend this morning sent me a video that the Young Turks, which is a liberal news talk show, posted last night. That's now top trending video in the US in the top 10, I think. And so clearly it's not died out by now. So I figured that the best way to actually get the correct information out is from myself personally, since I was actually there to experience it. And with that being said, I just want to clearly mention that it is very important to let young conservatives know that it's totally okay and even beneficial to call out members of your own party that are on the same side of the aisle as you. It's actually better than not doing that, because then we have a lot of people misrepresenting our personal ideals by not backing their arguments with logic and fact, which are on our side. So I think it's essential to the conservative movement to call out when people don't represent us properly. There are a lot of people that have told me, why would you do this? Tommy's on our side. You know, you can't let anyone away from the conservative movement. We need as many people as we can get. And that's just not true. We don't need as many people as we can get. We need the right people on our side that are strong debaters that use logic and facts rather than just arguing and yelling at the camera and using basic talking points. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get into the event itself. So like I said, Tommy did speak at SAS this past week. She spoke on the last night, and I was so pumped to hear her speak because I had actually prepped the question weeks in advance once I figured out that she was going to be speaking at the event. I actually passed it around amongst friends, both conservative and liberal, to make sure that it was well worded, respectful, got my point across, and wasn't at all intended to corner her or to try and try to pick a fight or anything like that. I genuinely wanted to understand her stance on abortion. I personally want to dedicate my life to fighting this issue, and I was a huge fan of hers before this past March when she announced on the leftist talk show The View that she was pro-choice. And so this was in no way meant for me to be rude or condescending or anything like that. So I genuinely wanted to understand her argument, not to the point where I probably agreed with it, but to the point where I just comprehended her logic. And so my turn came. I was pumped. I sat right on the aisle seat so that I had a direct path to the mic that a Turning Point USA employee was holding. And while they were kind of shifting from her speech, which she made before, to the Q&A session that she was holding afterwards, he asked me while we were waiting for Tommy to get situated, can I see your question? So I thought he was just curious. I had it typed up on my phone, so I showed it to him, and he looks right at me and says, "You can't talk about abortion." And I was honestly in shock. I didn't know what to say. I thought he was kidding, and when he saw my look of confusion, he clarified, "I'm really sorry. I'm just doing what I'm told." And he used their names when he said, "Tommy and Charlie," meaning Charlie Kirk, which is the president of Turning Point, don't want to talk about controversial issues. They'd rather stick to the economy, the Second Amendment, and free speech. So those are obviously all controversial issues in and of themselves. So being polite as I could, because I was getting quite confused and irritated, I said, "Can you just check that? I'm sitting right here, right next to you. Can you just come back to me once you figure it out?" And he said, "Yeah, of course. I'll go check that out for you." Well, he didn't come back. And actually, I returned to my seat and watched as at least a dozen other students went up to both employees, which were standing on both sides of the room that we were in, turn away students, and students returned to their seats, some arguing clearly, some asking why, and then others just being confused and returning to their seats. And obviously, they were asking similar questions to myself, and so I grew very frustrated, but when I grew frustrated, I kind of internalized it, whereas others actually began to shout out, are you pro-life? Talk about abortion, because Tommy was actually covering issues ranging from feminism to women's rights, and she obviously was avoiding even using the word abortion or anything closely related to that. She actually at one point retorted back at someone that shouted out saying, "You need to simmer down, you don't want to mess with me." So she obviously knew that people were frustrated that she was not allowing people to ask her difficult questions. Even though we were her peers, we were her fellow conservatives with almost all the same viewpoints and ideologies, and she was still refusing to even let anyone ask her a question that was going to make her slightly uncomfortable. So with that being said, I took to Twitter. Like I said, I internalized my frustration. And so the whole conference, there were actually people using this hashtag SAS2017, to comment on the speakers, to tell people about events that were occurring, anything like that. Basically just this main way of communicating amongst all, 3,000 of us students. So I took to Twitter only to communicate that this happened and to sympathize with all the other people that I saw were also being made to return to their seats. So I'm going to go ahead and read the tweet. If you want to look at it yourselves, you can go ahead and look. It's my pinned tweet. My handle is Knox, K-N-O-X, Knox, who's there. Twitter didn't have enough room for it there, so it's D-E-R, there. And I said in my first tweet, "I was just told I could not ask Tommy Lauren my question at SAS 2017 because at Charlie Kirk 11 and Lauren didn't want to address the abortion issue. I spent hundreds of dollars to be here, but you're going to deny me my free speech." Now, what a lot of people pointed out was, that's not free speech. You clearly don't know what that is because it's a private organization and they aren't entitled to let you say anything. Well, yes, of course, believe it or not, I've taken enough political science courses in my life to at least address the issue of free speech. The reason I use that terminology, which probably most other attendees would have understood, is because Tommy used those two words at least 6 times in her speech in her Q&A session, as well as dozens of other speakers discussing that exact issue on college campuses. So it was clear that there was hypocrisy here, which is why I used those exact words, free speech. And then I continued on, again, quite frustrated, saying, "You've turned away dozens of students wanting to ask Tommy about her pro-abortion stance. Who's the snowflake afraid of free speech and open discussion now?" Now, the reason I use the word snowflake, which also is slightly irritating to me because I feel like it's very overused, but Tommy actually made a whole video the night before she came to Turning Point discussing the barbarity and ignorance of snowflakes. And then she is the epitome of hypocrisy and being a snowflake herself and not being able to address certain uncomfortable questions about her ideologies and viewpoints, which is her job. That's what she's paid to do, is to stand up on a stage or be on a television and talk about the hard issues. So I was quite irritated about that. Basically, a couple minutes after her Q&A session ended, she actually took to Twitter to block me without saying anything. So clearly not only is she a snowflake behind a podium, but she's also a snowflake behind a screen as well. I didn't even directly talk to her on Twitter. I just mentioned her, and so she could not even take, me calling her out on the internet, much less asking or answering a question that I had in front of 3,000 other young conservatives. So with that being said, the event ended. Frustrated as I was, I got up to walk out, and I actually walked by a group of students that I overheard discussing that they also had their questions censored. So I stopped and I said, "Hey, I did too." And they said, "Oh, you just tweeted that. Yeah, we saw that. Do you want to talk to Charlie with us?" Charlie Kirk, again, being the president of Turning Point. And so I said, "Yeah, sure, let's wait." About an hour after the event ended, so about an hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes, because there was another speaker after Tommy, Charlie finally came and took us up to a conference room in West Palm Beach Convention Center, and he essentially let us vent our grievances to him, and then said, "I'm sorry, it was a huge miscommunication error. I take all responsibility." And while I really don't understand how it could have been miscommunicated when there were 2 Turning Point employees doing the same thing on both sides of the room, I genuinely felt that he was sorry and was apologizing and accepted responsibility. So to Charlie Kirk, I wholeheartedly accept your apology. I know that you messed up, and just don't let it happen again. And he promised that. So the one person that obviously has not apologized just quite yet is Tommy. I'm still blocked from her on Twitter, and she has actually taken to her own social media accounts to call us out, saying, "I've made my point clear. I don't owe you anything." First of all, you have not made your point clear. I watch your videos regularly, and you obviously avoid the issue, which is why I wanted to address it at this conference. Secondly, it's your job to say things. You repeat the same things over and over and over again with all other issues. Why can't you do the same with abortion? It's your job to do that. Now, if you don't want to address an issue, then you can't be in this field of work. Like, you need to address your ideologies and your viewpoints with facts and logic and actual reasoning rather than just avoiding controversial or difficult issues altogether. So with that being said, I want to encourage my fellow conservatives to not be afraid to call out someone on the same side of the aisle. Same with liberals. Both sides of the aisle need to work and bring their facts and their logic and their reasoning forward, and that's the only way that we are going to get anything done in this country, that we're going to fix anything at all. And so I really think Tommy needs to step it up and be more logical and not just scream at the camera with basic talking points. Thanks for joining me, guys. Have a good evening.